2026 is a big season for Formula One as it's going to be a regulation change, a lot of electrical stuff being introduced, and newer things. It has really been discussed, I think, a lot over YouTube videos, like what's happening with the engine, the sustainable fuel, how it's going to be more reliant on ERS. But I want to talk about certain things that have been discussed within really the last month and past week, and newer things that I think is extremely exciting for 2026, things that I agree with and disagree with, and actually really exciting news. First, actually a confirmation of a driver that will be in 2026, I guess. Then also talking about the teams in 2026 that I think will be happening and some that are already kind of in the works. Will these engines be louder? This is what I'm most excited about. And actual disagreements and agreements by drivers. So let's talk about, like I said, a driver that is already kind of confirmed to join. So they already have Audi, the team that is probably one of the most exciting prospects to see coming into the 2026 season. They already have confirmed a reserve driver, which he goes by the name of Neil Johnny, is set to join. He's a veteran. He's a 39-year-old Swiss driver that's been around the block for a long period of time in different types of avenues of sport, really motorsport. He's been competing in and has been pretty successful in all the rest of them. I think for now, just having a reserve driver, I guess it's kind of cool that he's really there for the Audi project and I guess a reserve. It's some news for the 2026 season. Who do I think will join Audi? Well, I'll give you kind of my opinion on it too. I think by the end, at some point, we're probably going to see a Sainz and Mick Schumacher type of ordeal. Maybe Vettel too. Maybe Vettel instead of Mick. But that's what I think. That's a hint towards where I think Mick will also go in some point at the season. Now talking for the teams that are joining 2026. I mean, first of all, the number now to join, which I think will be the number that's going to be introduced, right now it's 200 million, which is a very small number apparently for Formula One. And the number that is being really talked about and that a lot of teams are setting out to really expect for them to join Formula One is $1 billion. Do I feel like this is a fair assessment? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the thing that just happened with Ryan Reynolds and Michael B. Jordan and really that group of celebrities buying a stake into Alpine for 200 million comes to show you the value of a Formula One team is not anywhere near 200 million. It is probably around that 1 billion mark. So joining Formula One for 1 billion, I guess, is a fair assessment to make. They also have announced that people have offered to buy a sport for 20 billion, and that not being even close enough if the sport is valued to 17 to 18 billion. So it gives you an idea of where the team's processes are, and really even Stefan Domenicali and Ben Sullin and the guys that really run the Formula One show. So I think 1 billion is fair. I know it sounds ridiculous to just like us in general as fans and people, but hey, that's the beauty of this sport. The treasure of it. It's just that pristine and that prestigious. Look at these cars, I mean, that are coming out onto the grid. So for that reason, I can agree with this. It's also a really ridiculous number, but High Tech is one of the ones, I mean, you guys should probably know them from Formula 2. They've been competing in Formula 2 for countless amount of years now. They've been pretty decent, and now they're actually looking to join the Formula 1 grid. I think this is an example of a good investment trying to join. I know that some billionaire in Asia was speaking about joining in 2026. I don't know how far that's going to get, but hey, it was talked about, so I don't know. The rumor mill is out there. Now, Andretti, they have to join the sport. In my opinion, putting 12 teams into the sport would be beautiful. Put High Tech in, put Andretti with those Cadillac motors maybe coming in 2027, that'd be sick. I think having like a variety of engine manufacturers, hey, even if they join Renault, that's another team with Renault, that'd be pretty cool. Who will High Tech join? I'm probably gonna assume Mercedes. Mercedes is always the team that kind of picks up the pieces. I mean, it'd be cool if they're like a Ferrari, but I doubt that. I think Mercedes will be the team because they are a British racing team, and I think that makes the most sense. Maybe they go to Red Bull powertrains. I'm not sure. I think that Andretti joining with 1 billion is a possibility. I think High Tech joining is probably another high possibility. There were other teams that were discussed and talked about in very little amounts of our Formula Equal being like a thing for some point. The Asia thing that I was talking about, Formula Asia, I think is what it was called. So these are the real two serious contenders. I mean, what I really love to see would be Porsche. Porsche would be an amazing, amazing team to join the Formula One grid, but that's just not happening. Now, what I was excited about when Stefan Domenicali actually really talked about this, the fans really want to hear engine noises be louder. I mean, just listen to the example of a V8, a V10, and a V12. I mean, point proven right there. I mean, I don't think that these V6 cars can sound anywhere near to that. And in person, I'll play even a video from when I was at the Miami Grand Prix, how they sound like in person. I still like it, but it's not a V8. And personally, out of all the engines, I like the V8 the most. The downshifts on a V8 just sound so beautiful. The car really, it feels like it's just about to fly off in a V8. That's what I like. I love the V12, I love the V10. I think the V10 is better than the V12. V12 is just a little, it sounds sick, don't get me wrong, but the downshifts aren't as profound. And downshifting, I think, is my favorite sound in a Formula One car, especially the V8s when they had that blown diffuser. I mean, that just sounded absolutely ridiculous. So that was my favorite, for sure. It was the way that the V8 car sounded. It was just chef's kiss, for sure. But yeah, he talks about the engines actually being louder. That is a goal of his. He says even in interviews, the sport isn't electric. It is a gas sport. It is a sport where it is required to have sound. And I agree. Formula doesn't have his identity if it's a sport where the engines sound wonky or really not to the level that a Formula One car should sound like. I do think the V6 cars are a little weak. I don't think that they're as bad as people point them out to be. I know that the V8s and V10s were soaring. You could hear them from miles away. But I still like the V6 sound. I can't lie. I like the V6 sound, especially on a Ferrari car. I think a Ferrari sounds ridiculous. Not too huge on the Mercedes, but I'm really not a big fan of like the Red Bull. I think the Red Bull is super weak when you actually listen to the sound of the car. Renault, kind of whatever. But I'm okay with the Ferrari and the Mercedes. But before that though, the way that the Ferrari sounded, I really hope that this actually gets introduced and we really do hear a louder engines. But with the MGUH actually out of the car, there is opportunity to make this engine vibrate at a way louder sound. And it is his goal to make it that. And I think that should be a goal definitely set out for Formula One. Like, regardless of technical, the sound needs to be there. A couple of drivers have kind of made their opinion. I mean, two very favorite drivers in Formula One. Fernando Alonso talks about 2026 and says that he disagrees with really the cars needing to be, he says that the weight doesn't really need to change. And I actually agree to this because safety is key. Honestly, with the halo being introduced and everything, now did I like the halo being introduced in the beginning? Not really, but do I like the way it looks now in cars? I actually think that it's very fitting towards these new floor regulation cars, and by how they look, I'm a fan of it. I actually think, well, first of all, I'm a fan that it saves lives. Second of all, I think that it actually looks pretty nice in a Formula One car, and really F2 and F3. Keeping really weight and safety to an optimum is important. Do the cars need to be a little less? Maybe. Put them 30, 40 kilos down and I think they will feel a little bit better. But the actual size of the car has to change in my personal opinion. But with size usually comes less weight. The size of the cars have to change. Do I want them to be as small as what they were before? No, because I think the cars look sick being big. I know that might be a controversial opinion, but I like the cars being bigger and looking more rocket ship-like. I think I like seeing all the innovation on it. I do want the cars to be smaller than what they are now. I mean, now they're like a limo, but if I was to use a comparison between cars and saying that the 05, 06 cars were like Fiats, I would want it to be like a four-door sedan, somewhere in between. I don't really want it to be super small. I also don't want it to be super big. Somewhere in between would be a good measure of what the 2026 cars should aim to look like. And I agree with Alonso. I think keeping the weight is important. And then Lewis also talks about the weight. He mentions that the weight is an issue with the cars and they feel very, I mean, the cars naturally, as more weight comes onto it, there will be more understeer and sometimes the cars will feel different. But, I mean, back in the past, driving with Formula One cars, for example, in Spa, you weren't able to take certain corners at full down on the pedal. Now you're actually able to do that. So yes, adding more weight did cause certain problems like the understeer and making cars just kind of look clunky. Like specifically Mexico doesn't really look great for Formula One cars. In my personal opinion, I feel like they feel very clunky, but it also has to do with the track being very odd. Mexico is just one of those tracks where the cars feel very clunky, and as Lewis says, he actually doesn't mind the size, he minds the weight. He talks about the tires being heavy, he talks about really just the braking zones being longer, and yes, weight is an issue because of that. Braking zones being longer, being clunkier in certain corners, it does provide different types of problems, but I think being able to change the size would also help with that. And like I said, it just needs to be just a tad bit lighter. It doesn't need to be 500 kilos like it used to be. I mean, now it's 790, which is ridiculous. If we can get it to that 700 mark, I think that's fair enough. Even 720, 730 would be a better assessment of the cars. But what are your guys' opinion on what's happening for 2026? We're obviously going to keep getting info till it comes along and different types of ideas and what's actually happening, and when we finally actually see how the cars are going to look like. But what are your guys' opinion on it? Please leave a like, subscribe. It would really mean the world, and peace.